Good morning, mothers, grandmothers, godmothers, great-grandmothers. Happy Mother's Day. God bless and keep all of you. Hey, warrior saints. Christ is risen. So, in my home on Valentine's Day, the Khoury and I don't go out. So our custom is that she cooks a lovely meal and we sit around the table together with our girls and we have a beautiful family dinner. This past Valentine's Day, and we each give everyone a card, a Valentine's greeting card. And this year on Valentine's Day, we had our ritual, our custom. We sat around the table, we had dinner, it was beautiful. The girls were around the table and my bride was sitting next to me. And she gave me first her card, and beautiful. Always her words are eloquent and beautiful and flowing with love. I gave her my card, and it was good. I'm not going to tell you what I said, but it was good. And so she read this card, and it really, thank God, it warmed her heart. She leaned into my shoulder a little bit with her head, and she said to me very softly, "I love you," and gave me a little kiss. And I said to her what every husband should say at a moment like that, when there is this great tenderness and this great love, between husband and wife. And I looked really deep into the depths of her soul, into her eyes, and I said to her, "How you doing?" Well, why? What would you say, right? So the littlest one says, "Ew, Baba, that's dirty." And I said, what are you talking about? She said, no. She said, "Ew, Baba, that's inappropriate." I said, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "I don't even know if I know what that means, but I know that it's dirty." Right? So it gave us, however funny that may have seemed, it gave us an opportunity to speak to our children. And we talked at the table with our children at that meal on Valentine's Day about healthy Christian marriage. We talked about healthy Christian sexuality between a husband and a wife and the way that it is done appropriately and in a healthy, godly manner. This morning, in the Gospel of John, chapter 9, we see a little bit of a different story. There's a man who was born blind. He couldn't see. And Jesus comes to him and he heals him. Right? You know the story. In chapter 9, he spits into the ground and the dirt, and he makes mud, and he puts it on his eyes. And he gives him the commandment to go and wash his eyes, and he comes back seeing. Now, this is right after Jesus says to the disciples that I am the light of the world. You want to see in all of the darkness? You want to see how to walk, how to live life? I am the light that shows you how to do that, says Christ. And the blind man listens to Christ. He heeds his commandment, and he goes to the pool of Siloam, and he washes his eyes, and the text says he comes back seeing. Christ healed him. He completed him. He saved him in that moment by his heeding to the commandments. Now, the Jews didn't like it. The Pharisees were really upset with Jesus. Right? In the immediately preceding verses, right before chapter 9, at the end of chapter 8, they wanted to stone Jesus to death. They were jealous. And they made this statement that anybody who believes or says or confesses that this Jesus is the Son of God, he or she will be kicked out of the temple, out of the synagogue. Like that's their social standing. They would be outcasts. It would be almost tantamount to them to death from their community if anyone dared to confess that Jesus was the Christ. And so they bring the man, tell us the story. He says, "I don't really know what happened. I was blind. This guy, Jesus, healed me. Now I can see." And they said, "We don't know who he is," right? They didn't want to deal. They were a little bit jealous of Jesus. So they kicked the man out. And then they call his parents. And his parents do something really funny. Actually pretty sad, pretty soft, pretty weak. Not very crucifixional, to be sure. They ask his parents, "Is this your son who was born blind?" And they say, we know that he's our son. I mean, that's our kid. We know that. We know that he was born blind, but we don't know anything else about how he sees. You better ask him. Let him take care of it. He's old enough. Let him figure it out, right? That's what they said. Now, the Pharisees that represent in this story the world of all the evil and all of the wickedness that is calling this blind man away from Christ, when they call his parents because of their own fear and their own self-interest and perhaps their own exhaustion and perhaps a host of other things, they said, okay, world, you deal directly with him, right? Perhaps he was even blind, if we want to look at the text in a functional sense. Maybe that he was blind from birth, not necessarily unable to see physically, but blind in that they didn't guide and teach him about life. And so that when Jesus came, he had never seen this before. But because he experienced that healing, he was able to say, I believe you are the Son of God. But the parents, in their cowardice, passed the responsibility back to their son. Now, beautiful part of the end of the story is that they call the son back for the final time, and they quiz him again, the Pharisees. They argue with him again, and he says, I told you already, Jesus did this. Maybe you want to become his disciples also. And they got so angry and felt so jealous that they kicked him out of the synagogue and outcast him. And he came to Christ and followed him. Have you parents, on this beautiful day of Mother's Day, we don't pick on moms, we pick more on dads than moms, because it is both of our responsibilities together. Do we have those moments where we've allowed our children to be taught by the world? Maybe we're tired at the end of the workday. Maybe we have stress in our careers, or maybe mom and dad are arguing with one another. They're not in a good place to talk about it. Maybe for some there is no dad or there is no mom, right? Maybe for some there is neither. And so with all of the heaviness and all of the burdens that we carry, do we sometimes allow our children to be raised by the world? See, the children are going to be raised. They're going to learn. They're going to hear from somewhere. The challenge is for us, let it be from our lips and our hearts and our teachings and our understandings, and not from the teachings of the world, right? Not from the teachings of the world. The world will teach them a very self-focused life. We have been called to teach them a crucifixional life, right? A life of sacrifice of myself for the sake of other. And so parents, we ought to take that responsibility quite seriously, right? So how do we do that? And I know that we all want to do that. I don't think any parent ever says, oh, we're going to have a child and then just throw them to the wind. Good luck. I don't think we do that. I think we have in our hearts and in our souls the desire to raise beautiful warrior saints. But when the turmoil of life and the chaos of the world enters in, sometimes we fall short on those responsibilities. So this morning, the practical point on today's practical point on the way of the warrior saint that I want to give to us is one way, and perhaps even the most important way about raising our children. And that is to talk with our children. To talk with our children. And there are two parts of this that I want to speak about. The first part is not to talk at them. In fact, I would say not even to talk to them, but to listen. Listen to them. Ask them questions and listen to their answers. Right? Every person wants to be heard. What greater person to listen to a child than his father or her mother? Listen to what they have to say, and I promise you will be surprised. You will probably find, as I do, that they're actually smarter than you are. And they think better than you do. And they reason better than you do. And they have better faith than you do. If you listen to them, you can ask them questions to help draw out of them their own thought. It will also give you an opportunity to see where they are. Give them an opportunity to see where they are and what they're struggling with and what they're excelling at and what are their feelings and their emotions. It's very easy, parents, sometimes, and tempting to want to do this. But I encourage you, listen to them. Some people, there's all kinds of, whatever we call terminology about how to do this. Reflexive listening, to be empathic, and on and on. Great, whatever you want to do. Listen to your children. It's important. You might learn from them too. Now, that's not the only step in this two-part process. As I said, there's a second step. And the second step is, so let me say this. There's this funny little movement out there called what is it? The youth ministry. Thank you. It's called relational ministry, where we just have a relationship with the other person to fully humanize them. And I think that's a nice idea. It comes down to this empathic listening. But it falls very short, in my opinion, because it doesn't have the second step. And the second step is to teach and to instruct them, right? To teach them and instruct them on what is right, on what we believe, on how to live, right? It doesn't mean, again, that we wave the finger, but that we teach them right from wrong. And so this two-part process of dealing with children and loving children is first to listen and hear them, and second is to teach them and instruct them the way of truth. They don't know what's right from wrong as children. That's why that God gave them to us. He gave them to us to teach them and to raise them. You know, it fascinated me when my girls were born. They didn't even understand the word no as little kids, right? I mean, parents have to teach them no, otherwise they're sticking forks in electric sockets, right? We have to teach them all the way through. So after we hear their thoughts and hear their ideas and gauge where they are, we then, as parents, are called to teach, to guide, and to instruct them in living a Christ-like life. Now, the end of that Valentine's Day story actually was beautiful. It's hard. So what I'm about to tell you is heavy. It's caused me a lot of stress. I know it's caused stress in my house. My oldest came to me about a week ago and said, "Baba, can I talk to you?" I said, "Of course." And she proceeded to tell me a story, 13 years old, about another kid in her class who, at 13 was promiscuous and, is expecting a child. Brutal, heavy. Like, I don't even know what to say to that. And so my first reaction was like, "Oh my God, you're never going to school again. I'm going to lock you in the house and homeschool starting today." Like, that was my first reaction. But what I said, thank God. What I said to her was, it was God's hand for sure, because I don't have this in me. I said to her, "What do you think? How does that make you feel?" And she said beautiful words to me. She said, "I know that that we don't do that because God asks us not to. But I also know why we don't do that, because these kinds of things happen, and because if we do that, we rob ourselves and our future spouse of the opportunity to find that beautiful, perfect, selfless love that should be reserved for one person with another only." I mean, I was like, all right, I don't tell you that story to brag. Certainly I'm a proud father. Certainly I believe I have the best children in the world. But I tell you the story simply to show you that if you take that effort and speak with them and listen to them, it works, right? And we will raise a future generation of warrior saints. Nay, a current generation of warrior saints. They may be younger than us, but warrior saints nonetheless. So I encourage all of you, as parents, as grandparents, and as godparents, to raise thy children. Do not turn them loose to the world the way the parents of the blind man did, but listen to them, hear where they are in life, ask their thoughts, their ideas, be surprised by the depth of their thought, by the power of their faith and their relationship with God, and then guide them and instruct them how to continue the balance, the remainder of their life, living according to the light of Christ our God. I know you can do it. I know it's hard, it's difficult, and the world is tumultuous, but I know that it is in you, and I know that you can do that. And so I encourage you, warrior saints, give that effort for the sake of your children, and perhaps even for their children as well. May our great God and Savior, who is risen from the dead, bless and keep you. Amen.